Well, that didn't take long at all, did it? I mean, what was it? A little over a month ago, we were, wrapped up and still are in the brilliance that was on display in the 2025 Roland Garros final, and we get a rematch. Truly a marking, I think, now that we are in the duopoly era. I know that, last year, these two, Carlos Alcaraz, Jannik Sinner, split the slams. Played 3 times, but even so, only got the one match at the slams at Roland Garros last year, and that one, of course, both not at 100%. But now in 2025, Jannik Sinner missed 3 months, and we are already about to match that tally of having played 3 times. And now for back-to-back Grand Slam finals. 13th meeting overall. I believe first time we get the same Wimbledon finalists as the French Open finalists since 2008, when in that case it was Rafa and Roger. Really, really exciting stuff, and it does make for that middle chunk of the tournament being so, unsuspenseful, a little more worth it, knowing that we get, the two guys right now that are probably entrenched in the middle of their primes at this point, and seem to be expanding that cavernous gap between them and the rest of the field right now by the tournament. It's at the very least great that we get to see those two titans face off against each other. Just makes the stakes, the occasion, that much more grand. But before getting into previewing this particular final itself, let's just talk about their paths here. I think, those semifinals were pretty emblematic, actually, in a microcosm of, the paths here, where I actually got the feel of both those matches flip-flopped. I had 4 for both, but I thought, the ones with the tiebreakers would be Sinner Djokovic and be, really fine margins making the difference. And I had Alcaraz, Fritz being the sort of never in doubt, 4-setter. And the outcomes were reversed. The more gripping semifinal did turn out to be Fritz Alcaraz, which, again, has been the case the entirety of this tournament. It's actually stuck to plan for 2025 Alcaraz. Being efficient early rounds just hasn't really been, a part of Alcaraz's vocabulary this year. But I do think, first round aside, for the most part, that's caused more angst to his fans than it actually has Carlos himself. He has not really been in any type of real danger. When he needs to lock in, he knows when that is, and the survival instinct again kicks in and focuses him in a way that he's not in, pretty much any other situation. And for Carlos in particular, since I would say like the Rublev match, 4th round, I think the biggest standout has been the improved serve that we all took note of in Queens, finally joining us here in Wimbledon. And it has been absolutely huge in so many ways, so many cheap points, semi-botting at times. And it's been a huge asset because I don't really think the Alcaraz ground game has really clicked into that A+ level at any point this tournament yet. Well, I guess aside from the first set against Norrie in his quarter. But that aside, like all the other hallmarks of Grasscaraz has been on full display. The current best mover on this surface, the footwork, the, just touch skills, both with the drop shot as well as in the forecourt. And then just the audaciousness that has, allowed him to still not hold back with any of the artillery. And that despite, I don't think the ground game being at its best, has still allowed for opponents to have to respect the threat of every single weapon at his disposal. And also that shoot mentality just giving him enough volume to still make his fair share of highlights that we've come to expect from the modern-day magician of this sport. And before the semifinals, I talked about the Norrie quarterfinal being ideal in every way, especially for me, who's been looking out for signs of fatigue or been wary of just the amount of tennis that he's played since early April. That match was perfect in the sense that, it gave him 2 days off going into the final weekend of this tournament. I think served as a little bit of an escape hatch to reset after a relatively arduous, even for him, first couple of matches this tournament. And also, was the one time I thought he flashed the type of level I think he will need in this final. And then talking about his semifinal, most of the credit does go to Taylor Fritz. And because of, Fritz's performance in that match, I feel like that's the best test that either one of Sinner or Alcaraz have come through this tournament. And really, the fourth set is doing much of the heavy lifting there. The first three, sort of uneventful. I mean, Alcaraz, a little bit scratchy from the ground throughout the course of this match, but the serve still did a lot of carrying, both first and second, actually. I mean, portions of this match, Alcaraz was, untouchable on serve. For a big stakes match, I think this was as big as I've seen Alcaraz serve. On both first and second, I'm pretty sure he was literally 1 mile per hour slower than Fritz on both. And that's averaging 127 and 106 respectively. But in the fourth, Fritz really was, peaking. Everything he needed to do to get his teeth into this match, he was doing at a very high level. The serve got into an absurd zone. It was the one passage of play that I thought the Fritz serve actually demonstrated superiority to the Alcaraz serve, was that fourth set. The entirety of it felt like every time a first serve landed, it was landing in the corners. Even the seconds were landing huge, and for his part, anytime he was getting a hold of a return, he was just pasting it with, unbelievable pace and depth. Anytime he got a look at a ball he could unload on in a rally, he was doing it the first shot he got, right up until crunch time, actually. But I thought Carlos did a spectacular job, really, to weather that storm. Even without his best stuff from the back of the court, at times, visibly being rushed to the forehand in particular, and that shot being leakier than we're used to seeing. He understood exactly what he needed to do, found his way forward, or brought Fritz in exactly when he needed to, and oftentimes doing it in, really high leverage pressure points. Of course, going in the breaker from up 4-1 to Taylor reeling off 5 points in a row and serving at 6-4. And again, we get back to the survival instinct. It's almost as if Alcaraz said, not today. Just willed it into existence. We're not going to a fifth on my watch. And in a set that he couldn't read the Fritz serve, the entirety of it, just reflexed back a 134 on set point at 6-4. And, literally immediately after putting the return back in play, just took the bull by the horns, took charge of the point, got himself in. After that, I think the 6-5, the 6-all point, you could definitely say, Taylor might have wanted him back. Couple of more conservative forehands, bucking the trend of how he'd been going the entirety of the match. And, yeah, the clutch superstar on the other side of the net certainly made him pay for that. But overall, just more clutch Alcaraz than anything here. Something we've gotten super used to and will continue to see for many years to come. Great win to be able to come through in 4. As far as being battle-tested, that's the one right there. And as for Jannik Sinner, outside of the Dimitrov match, completely unbothered throughout the course of this tournament. You guys know my 2 cents if you watched my semifinal preview on that Dimitrov match. Really just an example of any given day. Just happened to be, on that particular day, a combination where Sinner very well could have been sent packing. On the day, we sort of got, at least I've never seen, a version of Bomber Bulgarian Dimitrov where he was just serving bombs on the serve. We've been through it, 130 plus on the average first serve speed those first 2 sets, lacing the forehand on just about any look he got. And, yeah, on the flip side, a version of Sinner that I've never seen the timing that far off, really ever, for Sinner 2.0. A lot at play there. Jannik impaired on the forehand, or maybe at least just thinking about it more and in his head about, giving the forehand the full swing like typically after feeling pain in the elbow that day. But whatever the case may be, since unfortunately, Grigor Dimitrov was unable to continue that match due to that pectoral tear, Jannik Sinner snapped right back into what we expect of Jannik Sinner. Clinical, dominant, and for the purposes of this final, just really putting to rest any of the physical concerns that may have been surrounding him at the beginning of week 2 of this tournament. On the surface, they were tight set scores with him and Ben Shelton, but he pretty much destroyed him in that match. The Shelton serve, eased the burden on the scoreboard, but realistically, that was not a very competitive match. And then, talking about yesterday's semifinal, a match that you would think, coming out on the other end of Jannik Sinner, would definitively be battle-tested, but not really the case here. Obviously, everything you come away with this match all comes back to, Djokovic clearly not 100% from the off in this match. And what it really came down to was that, in tandem with a lot of things showing up very early that we have seen at large to make for this head-to-head, where Sinner's now won 6 of the last 7 and 5 in a row. It does feel like the combo of both, and of course it all starts with the injury, but the combo of both did seem to deject Novak Djokovic very early on in this match, and I really think that 3-5 game in the first set, where, it just seemed like he was totally checked out, trying to find any opportunity to kind of just bail out of rallies, that set the tone for the remainder of the match. As it is, I am still amazed every time I see it, and obviously it was exacerbated yesterday. His issues rendering him, virtually immobile relative to, the type of movement that Novak Djokovic needs to play his game, even as, he's adapted his game and made for the leaning on the movement, less of a factor than it has been at points in his career now that he's at an advanced age. But even so, Novak Djokovic at 100% right now. I don't think it matters which court it is. Lockdown mode, like it is an option against anybody else, it is not against Jannik Sinner, because his lockdown mode is just as watertight, except the ball's coming that much faster and harder. And this Djokovic's speed since that knee injury last year really, it's just hasn't been able to cut it. And that's why I've been very captivated whenever these two play, because it's just super weird seeing the guy that's held the title of best mover in tennis for over a decade just struggling to keep up. And that's why the dynamic in this matchup is more or less boiled down to Sinner just needs to play Sinner ball, and Novak Djokovic needs to have a day of just redlining out of his mind with everything that can possibly point shorten, that being his forehand in particular, the serve, the net play, the works. And here, there just wasn't going to be a chance to do that. There was absolutely nowhere to hide. I thought Patrick McEnroe actually made a very good point on the broadcast that if he were to guess, it would be something related to the hip, just because, it did really stick out that Djokovic just was not sliding at all in this match, and it seemed like it got worse as the match went on. There was one, open stance backhand slide, I think within the first 2 games I can remember, but other than that, he was notably just running through anytime he was, stretched out. Didn't even seem like he could make a quick stop to change direction. And one Jannik Sinner dip aside for the first 3-4 games of the third set, I felt like, just the tone that was set from that 3-5 game in the first set, it felt at that point, once Sinner won that game, it was like, all right, we're probably done here. And that makes it so we have this very unique run to the final where the one match that he was actually pushed, we only got through 2 sets and a handful of games there. And that was really the only opportunity there for Sinner to go up against some adversity. And, well, for the rest of Jannik Sinner's Wimbledon campaign this year, it's looked a whole lot like it has on any surface for the last year and a half. And that is, for the rest, for the mortals on tour, Jannik Sinner has pretty much been untouchable. But that's as far as the rest go. For his opponent, he's been the one kryptonite over that last 1.5 years. 5 losses on the trot, as we know. All but one, going to a deciding set. All but maybe 2 of them with Rome this year and Indian Wells 2024. They have been super, super tight. And what's crazy is that I don't feel like there's one thing between the lines tactically that Alcaraz has altered to create such a swing his way in a rivalry that previously had been advantage Sinner. Where, funnily enough, when it was advantage Sinner, he was a significantly lesser tennis player overall than he has been over the course of the period of time that this 5-match skid in the Alcaraz rivalry has occurred. Really feels like no 2 matches have been the same. Like, I might group them in ways that Indian Wells 2024 and Rome this year, it felt like Alcaraz really used a lot of shape and real smarts, as far as changing up pace to disrupt Sinner's power, both of which Jannik also sort of faded physically for different reasons. And then Roland Garros last year, I kind of felt like in a messy match, Alcaraz, despite his own struggles with a little bit of cramping through the middle part of that match, kind of just hung around long enough after going down 2-1 to where by the time it was late in that match, the entirety of the 5th set, he was going to be able to reap the rewards of being the physical, fresher player in the trenches. Felt like in that particular match, he kind of just outlasted Jannik in a match where both of them, of course, were under 100% coming in. And then you got Beijing 2024 and Roland Garros, of course, a couple weeks ago. Similar and different in ways where I think both boil down to just like the type of peak shot making that this head-to-head teases when it is at its very best that we first saw at the US Open in 2022 and subsequently in these 2 matches, where both matches in which the Alcaraz forehand was nuclear throughout and really did tip the scales in his favor, that in tandem with just that 1% among 1%er just clutch ability that Carlos Alcaraz has shown throughout the course of his young career, and that being the difference. I think the 2 of those matches are different, however, in the fact that I feel like Jannik did, figure something out there at Roland Garros. I felt like up through the Beijing matches, Sinner was sort of content to do what sufficed against the rest of the field. As I referred to it earlier, just play Sinner ball because, it's just such a well-oiled machine since that autumn of 2023, as if he's programmed. Like, nothing breaks down. The rally ball is the best in the world. And in a tennis, atmosphere now where the baseline game is king, that alone, while constantly tweaking, improving upon the auxiliary parts of the game, and really getting all of the, non-finesse things, which he is still quite good at, everything else in his game is well above average. And that, with the baseline prowess, it's just overwhelming to just about everybody else on tour. But as we know, the status quo has not worked out against Alcaraz, and especially over the course of a best-of-5 match where there's more leeway for his dips, trying to outsteady him has yielded anything from, close but no cigar to matches that ultimately at the end he was able to find a great deal of separation from Jannik with. All these variety of outcomes that ultimately have just not been good enough. What was good enough, obviously, in this rivalry for Jannik, I feel like rushing is the name of the game, taking time away. And it used to be a theme early on in the rivalry that Alcaraz would press in a way that we have been accustomed to seeing everybody else press against this version of Jannik. That, in addition to being uncharacteristically very, very inopportune when chances were presented to him, I think that part of it has swung back to the mean in their subsequent matches. I don't think that was really sustainable, given what a dynamo Alcaraz is in the mental department. But at Roland Garros this year, as I said after the match, I thought Sinner played this match a lot more resembling those early Sincaraz trends where, Alcaraz would be sort of baited into my forehand's bigger than yours, and Jannik Sinner came about as close as you can get without, crossing the finish line in that match. Of course, it's never over till it's over with Juan Carlos Alcaraz Garcia, but now that we're through the immediate aftermath of that match, I think there's a lot of solace for Sinner there, and this court certainly does make it conducive for him to be able to replicate that, on paper with more ease than he did on best-of-5 clay. I certainly don't think, the option for Carlos to play with more shape and be effective, at least not to the same extent as when he's deployed tactics like that, like at Rome this year. Because with the lower bounce at Wimbledon, in all likelihood, you try to do that, the ball's probably going to be right in Sinner's pocket from the back of the court. The way Alcaraz can definitely make use of that strategy, I think, would definitely be slicing. He has one of the better slices on tour, and obviously Grigor deployed it to great effect against Jannik. And Alcaraz is, again, the best mover on this surface right now, I think, considerably so. Even though Sinner definitely has made strides in that department, looks more comfortable than ever sliding on this court this year. But for Carlos, I think there's just so much utility in it. I think especially in the sense that I think the quality of Alcaraz's ball on the run on this surface, it really is bar none. I mean, he's getting to more balls than anybody else, and also what he's able to do. I mean, you guys saw that point against Rublev in the 4th round, just like sliding all over the place, keeping the ball low, and then just hitting an unthinkable winner from a ridiculous position. That's kind of all of it bottled up right there into one point. I think in the movement department, he has taken the reins from Djokovic in a similar way, where for a long time, that monopoly on grass for movement belonged to Djokovic. And certainly, I think in terms of finesse, there's the defense part of it, the slice, those going hand in hand. I definitely think there will continue to be room for Alcaraz to do what he has been doing all tournament long, and I think to great effect, mitigating how, damaging it's been for him that his forehand hasn't been, humming this tournament. And that being, all the touch stuff, the forecourt, the drop shots. Those are sort of his outs here on grass more than, using the width as he would on clay. But, that aside, I do think there will have to be a jump in forehand quality for Alcaraz in this final for sure. Because, if not, in contrast to their last 5 meetings, this court, while Wimbledon, not the quickest grass court even anymore, it is still going to behave in a way that is conducive to tactics that Sinner would like in this matchup. He's been cleaner this tournament. We know, one match aside, that hasn't had any longer reaching effects on his matches after the fourth round, that dual-winged attack is going to be there for Jannik Sinner from the baseline. And he'll back himself against anybody in baseline exchanges, and the way that he and his team work, I am sure they probably translate a lot of the tactical approach as far as the baseline aggression and going at Alcaraz with heat, taking time away. Just overall playing the percentage is a lot less. And I think actually one thing I forgot to mention was even on defense. I mean, he was lacing the running forehand in the Roland Garros final, keeping Alcaraz honest and making sure that, even when he was attacking with width, that the attack was quality, not letting him get away with anything too central. I would think all of that as far as the approach gets translated tomorrow. And then the thing I'm most excited to talk about that everybody has honed in on in this recent 5-match skid is the serve. I approach this the way that everybody else has, picking at the serve stats in their last 5 matches. And that's, in a vacuum, in isolation. I would say actually with the caveat of coming into this year's grass court season, we all agree that Sinner has the superior serve to Alcaraz, theoretically should be getting more cheap points, should be in position to take advantage of +1 tennis a whole lot more often, but in practice that has not at all been the case. And I do actually remember Sinner in studio for ESPN during this tournament, stating that more than any other component of his game, he basically feels like the most untapped potential still is there in the serve, based on his stature, how tall he is. Feels like he can be serving even better. And I've always felt with the Sinner serve that it's a really quality serve and hard to read when the first serve falls in, but in the Alcaraz matchup, it has really come under scrutiny because every single one of these matches, their last 5, that first serve percentage has been hovering, anywhere from at its highest 62% to 54% in their most recent match in the Roland Garros final. And in 3 of the 5, he's been under 60, and even the 2, again, 62 and 60.3% for serves in. And that is not the entire story here for why, this advantage on paper has just not manifested itself lately. But certainly it's playing a hand in mitigating what should be an advantage on paper. And Sinner is coming off a match against Djokovic that was easily his best of the tournament so far. Obviously still a compromised Djokovic, so take it with a grain of salt. But 74% is what it is as far as first serve percentage. And a serving effort anywhere near that tomorrow, this surface will reward him more than any other. And especially in what's expected to be very lively, hot, sunny conditions, that'd make him a really, really tough out with everything else that he does great. But all of this, again, is in concept, because you look at the data, which I'll have up here. The top is Alcaraz, the bottom is Sinner. These are just, the raw serving stats head-to-head for both of these guys. And as you can see, in these 5 matches, as far as first serves in, win on first and second, Sinner has outperformed Alcaraz in 3 of those raw data serving stats out of a possible 15. And yeah, given the trends in the rivalry where it's taken a while for Sinner to sort of be willing to switch up and, go outside the norm, which is good enough against everybody else, him losing the second serve points battle makes a good deal of sense, because other than the quality of the second serve return itself, where Alcaraz drives me up the wall sometimes with the amount of times that I see him step in, and I just don't think he's good enough yet at taking second serves on the rise. Just feels like watching him that he outright misses more second serves than he has any business of doing, not even putting them in court. But other than that, it makes sense because, in neutral, with Alcaraz's aggression and just the depth of his bag in terms of options, you're not staying in neutral for long. He is taking charge of the point the first chance he gets, even against Jannik Sinner. So, him winning more second serve points than Sinner, I think that makes sense. Obviously, the thing that we've thrown under a microscope is that Sinner's just not putting as many first serves in as you would like, and Alcaraz has obviously outperformed him in all 5 matches in that. But what I find surprising is that even that being the case, Alcaraz has still been winning more on first serve. And some of that I do think has to do with, despite my frustrations for Alcaraz as second serve returner, I think he is the best first serve returner in the world. His reach sort of defies, his build, his stature. The skills obviously need no introduction when he gets contact on the ball, what he can do, put it in uncomfortable positions. And considering that this grass court season and the last couple of matches, this is easily the best Alcaraz has ever served, I really would be interested in seeing what kind of factor that plays, because I'm sort of assuming this is just the Alcaraz serve we're going to see tomorrow. Whether Sinner's first serve corrects itself or not, I feel like Alcaraz's own serving the way that it has been through week 2 of this tournament, it's a real wild card X factor to me here. Last thing worth noting, I think, with the serves is the second Alcaraz on, hard courts, especially clay courts. The tried and true kick serve has been his go-to on the second. I would assume we see something more resembling what we saw against Fritz, going bigger on the second serve, because I would imagine, the kicker is probably again going to be sitting right there most times in Sinner's hitting pocket rather than putting him in a spot of bother. And yeah, that's the overall theme here of why I do feel like this is an excellent chance for Sinner to stem the tide in this rivalry. Overall, I don't think, excluding a true super fast slick hardcourt, the likes of Turin, in which case it would firmly be advantage Sinner, but anywhere else, I don't think that the venue gives any one player between the two of these a clear upper hand. And yeah, regardless of the phase in their career that they were, the entirety of their head-to-head will tell you that they are very evenly matched. Aside from the one caveat of a super fast hard court, I think that's the case regardless of surface. But the reason I do say that I think this is an excellent opportunity for Sinner to stem the tide and put a win on the board after 5 in a row for Alcaraz, which, by the way, is a case of when, not if, just given how close all these matches have been, and also the fact that after tomorrow, at least for the major tennis calendar, we are on hard courts the rest of the way. But contrary to on paper, Alcaraz has been there, done that at this event. 2 titles already. Sinner, this is his first Wimbledon final. I still do feel that this venue, I do feel makes it so that for the first time when these two have played since this world beater version of Jannik emerged, that they're playing at a venue that doesn't lean on the slower side. I know that to the eye it seems like Wimbledon's playing slower and slower every year, but it does still behave like a grass court. Serves get a boost, great returning, great forecourt, great touch skills all still get rewarded, the ball still stays super low, and all of that is just conducive to catering to what Sinner would like to do in this matchup and make it a whole lot easier than it has been in their 5 prior matches. where again, for Sinner, the name of the game will be to rush and take away time. So I am really interested to see how that plays out tomorrow, what changes as far as those dynamics. But even in spite of saying all of that, in spite of the fact that I think Sinner has been better throughout the course of this tournament, I am still picking Carlos Alcaraz. I'm sticking with the pre-tournament prediction. Really, all I have to do to feel good about that prediction tomorrow is just see that forehand there in a way that I know it can be. Not to say that it guarantees victory, but it certainly makes the task a whole lot doable, a whole lot less daunting. Throughout the course of this tournament, I really have been impressed. I think it really goes to show just how deep this kid's bag is as far as all of the shots and tricks at his disposal. The way that all these other pieces of his game have picked up the slack, the finesse, the movement, everything he does in the forecourt, and then especially the serving, it has been damn impressive to me that all of that has been able to cover up for a forehand that I don't think has performed at its best for all but like one match this fortnight. He will definitely need it tomorrow, and I'm trusting that it will be there. And, how can I say that? If we've only seen it once all tournament, well, look no further than this guy's track record. It speaks for itself as a big-time, big-match player at the back end of these slams and big tournaments. He's just been money, and I expect the antenna to be up tomorrow. It does become that much more important as well, already having defended Roland Garros, being able to complete that quote-unquote defense of the natural surfaces where he is still king, especially with hard courts on the horizon. I think he'll bring the goods tomorrow. I say Alcaraz in 5. But yeah, super psyched for this match. We are now firmly entrenched in the Sinner Alcaraz duopoly era. Can't imagine this lives up to Roland Garros a couple weeks ago. But boy, have we had some titanic Wimbledon finals this century. Who knows? And, if it's even remotely close to that Roland Garros final, obviously we are in for a treat. And you never know what's around the corner, so let's all lock in, enjoy the final, and of course, I will see y'all in the next one.